Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into the Moon Knight series, to where with this one we explore a bit of Mark's devotion and his reasoning to why he's so serious about being his version of the Fist of Khonshu. But also we're going to get into how his past brought him to be the type of Fist that he is now, with Mark always having leaned towards violence even as a child, but now with him being more selective as far as the when and where that he lets that side out, we actually find that discretion makes him better. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so with how we jump back in, we start off with looking back at a previous therapy session between Mark and Dr. Sturman. And it was back in the session where Dr. Sturman was bringing to Mark's attention some of her recent concerns. And so for Mark, he initially thought that she was talking about his dissociative identity disorder and how recently the other identities like Jake Lockley or Stephen Grant had shown up, which for Mark at the time, just going off of his assumption, with him believing that this is the concern that Dr. Sturman had, he let her know that they hadn't surfaced in weeks, and when they did, it was only minutes at a time. But again, for Dr. Sturman, this isn't what she's talking about. And to go even further, she lets him know that it's not about his divine brain damage either. Because as far as the quote-unquote brain damage, she's seen the scans and she's expressed her concerns before. And as far as Mark's dissociative identity disorder, he's recently shown to disassociate less, even with everything that he has going on, which is usually when people with that disorder would have more episodes, with the high stress situations triggering those identities and causing that individual to disassociate, which recently has not been the case for Mark. And this is why Dr. Sturman expresses that her concern is that Mark isn't being completely honest with her. And for Mark, with him hearing this, it throws him for a loop, because for quite some time now, he's been cooperating with these therapy sessions, he's gotten his different scans, and he's answered all of Dr. Sturman's questions. But even with that being the case, Dr. Sturman's real concern is that because Mark is so resourceful and so talented, from his military experience to his mercenary experience, as far as him knowing how to navigate different situations, and then on top of that, you add the charisma of Mark Spector, and together you really have the recipe for someone who knows how to hide their feelings. So for Dr. Sturman, even though Mark is checking every box as far as going to these sessions and seeming to be someone who's doing just fine, and even to the extent of him kind of knowing the right thing to say, and that's the thing that concerns Dr. Sturman, because with him showing up and just going through the motions, it makes it difficult for her to gauge the state of his mental health. And that's why at this point, with her knowing that he can hide his feelings well, she just asks him directly, "Why are you so unhappy, Mark?" Which for Dr. Sturman was a good tactic, because it wouldn't make sense to waste time on asking why is he hiding these feelings, because at that point she would just be walking into him giving her the runaround. But instead with her asking Mark why he's unhappy, and this causes Mark to open up and share with Dr. Sturman things that he's never told her before. And with doing this, Mark goes back to his Jewish upbringing, with his father being a rabbi, and how his father was the kindest, most gentlest person he knew. But even as a kid, Mark knew that unlike his father, for himself, kind and gentle really wasn't his thing. And with Mark seeing his father as this meek and gentle rabbi who loved peace and hated violence, as a child, these things made Mark think of his father as someone who was weak, and also as someone who was just unwaveringly loyal to a God who just didn't care. And for Mark, growing up Jewish with a father who was so strong in his faith, Mark experienced much of the traditional tribulations that came along with it, with the Jewish people having a history of losing their homes, losing their land, being enslaved, to where they escaped from being enslaved to then make their way to the desert. And with how Mark was raised, he was taught by his father that the perseverance of their people was their greatest quality. And Mark tells Dr. Sturman, like, when he died in the desert, like, can you blame him for throwing all of that away, with him discarding his previous God who let all those terrible things happen, who had also seemed quiet and distant, to then take on a new God with Khonshu, who spoke directly to Mark, brought him back from the dead, and from day one, Khonshu was like, let's get things done. And right away, Dr. Sturman tells him, like, nobody can blame you for wanting to live. But also she asks Mark, at any point did he regret that decision that he'd made? And really it's here where we get the substance of why Mark is unhappy. Because as he goes into the details, some of these things we know because we heard him tell Tigra. But with him answering this question and telling Dr. Sturman yes, like he feels those regrets. And it's here where you can tell that Mark learned along the way, like when he got the God that he thought he wanted, who spoke directly to him, and the God who wanted him to fight back, who also allowed Mark to indulge in his addiction to violence. But with doing this, Mark learned that this decision had cost him everything, because since he's become the Fist of Khonshu, he's realized from then to now that he's come to this point to where all the people he's loved, they're either dead, they hate him, or they're just outright afraid of him. Which again brings us back to the conversation of his daughter and her mother, who had taken the two of them as far away from Mark as she could out of fear. So for Mark looking back at his life, it's almost like a lose-lose situation, because on one hand you have the persecution of his Jewish upbringing, to where later when he decided to serve Khonshu, and this time around put everything into it by being loyal and unwavering, with him getting older and actually realizing those things did make his father strong. But with Mark applying that to his service as the Fist of Khonshu, he still ended up losing so much. And at this point, he's putting everything into being the Fist of Khonshu, or at least what he understands that to be, because now he really has nothing else. And he tells Dr. Sturman like no wonder he developed DID, because much of the time he would rather be anyone but himself. And so after this therapy session, this takes us into the current time at this moment, with Mark heading back to the Midnight Mission, and with doing so he's really not in the best mood, and understandably so, with that recent session bringing up some old feels as far as his memories with his father and his current situation with his daughter. But also when Mark gets back and Reese asks him how the session went, he quickly asks her to refer to him as Mr. Knight and not Mark. But at this point Reese lets him know that Terry's in his office waiting on him, and when Terry got there he didn't tell Reese what it was exactly, so all she knew is that Terry was spooked, and whenever Mr. Knight got back, Terry would just tell him whatever it was. But when Terry gets it out as far as what it is that has him so spooked, he tells Mark that he knows who it is who's been gunning for him, who's been sending people after him, because he's found out that it was Soldier. To where from here, Terry takes Mark to go check this out. And at this point, like even just moments prior to Mark getting this information, he had thought to himself like in this night with him going out to handle business, that he was going to be able to beat some people up and just blow off some steam because of that therapy session. But with Terry giving him this update about Soldier, Mark's rage kinda has to take the back seat for a moment, because he has to be certain about what's going on before he just lashes out on this guy who'd seemed to be a friend. And so it's here where Terry tells Mark that he'd found that Soldier has another apartment aside from what we'd seen before with Soldier living with his mother. But also in here they find all kind of sketchy spy equipment and surveillance gear, all pointing towards the Midnight Mission. But then also they find an old picture of Soldier before he got all his tattoos covered, and his old tats are just Hydra everything. But with discovering this and Mark not knowing where Soldier is at the moment, he sends Terry home and he tells Reese to leave the Midnight Mission and go somewhere safe, and preferably with Tigra, just in case Soldier shows up and Mark isn't there. But at this point for Mark, there are certain things that are just not adding up, because Soldier may have been ex-Hydra, to where then at some point he had quit and he had got his tattoos removed, or better yet covered like we had seen. But for Mark, before he really makes the call on who exactly he believes Soldier to be, he decides to do a little bit of research, and with doing so, he goes to see Soldier's mother. And for Mark, with him sitting down and having a talk with Soldier's mother, this gives him a much better understanding on who Soldier is, and even without him going into detail, but instead really it's Mark having a conversation with her in order to help his judgment call as far as what he's gonna do to Soldier once he finds him, but also just to sit down with her and have a general conversation, because it's only gonna help him piece together what he knows about Soldier so far, rather than just reacting and bashing the guy's skull in. But while Mark is here, he gets an alert from the Midnight Mission that there's been a perimeter breach. And when he goes back to check it out, rather than just walking right through the front door and just fighting his way through, he instead takes the more quiet and tactical approach by making his way under the Midnight Mission and sneaking his way in, only to then find Soldiers chained up with the place rigged to explode and the person who's been gunning for Moon Knight on the radio. And even though this voice on the radio is kind of like, you know, gotcha, plot twist, as far as Soldier not being the main person after Moon Knight, but even still, like with what Mark has seen with those old Hydra pictures, like there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be explained. But Mark's already made up in his mind that he's gonna try and save Soldier. But also at this point, it helps Soldier's case, because right away he's telling Mark to just leave, because the two of these guys, they don't know where the bomb is or how much time is left on it. And Mark's made up in his mind after talking to Soldier's mother that this guy's at least worth saving, because much like we've seen before when he told Reese that he doesn't kill people because of what they are but because of who they are. And it's kind of a similar thing that he's doing with Soldier here, with deciding to risk his life in order to save Soldier, because he believes Soldier to be a good person to some degree, even if he may have had some sort of history with Hydra. But at this point for Mark, there's really no time to like have this whole entire conversation, so he starts cutting on the chain with his plasma torch in order to get Soldier out of there, because also it's not like it's a full moon to where Mark will be at full strength and just break the chains, but he at least still has some of his gadgets, which lends for this solution to even be a possibility. But again, Mark has no idea how long this clock's gonna last, so in this moment he's kinda just relying on the battery to his torch to not run out before the chain is cut. And this voice on the radio going tick tock just ain't helping either. And with taking a look from outside, without a warning, the bomb just detonates. But shortly after, we come to find out that Mark had made his way out with Soldier by using the same point of entry that Mark had used to sneak his way in. But with Mark roughed up from barely getting Soldier out of there, it's here where he's then confronted by Terry, who really this whole time, Terry's just been an identity this guy's used as one part of the bigger picture of him messing with Mark's mind. Because at one point, as Terry, he went as far as to bring Reese back after Reese took off when she had seen all the Soldier's blood and she was about to lose control, with Reese still being fairly new to being a vampire. And come to find out now, Terry had only done this as a part of the bigger game. And when he reveals himself at this point, telling Mark that Terry never existed, and it's in this moment that he lets Mark know that from here forward to refer to him as Zodiac, which at this point just adds to the many things that Mark is dealing with in his life right now. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support, and for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.